Have you ever watched a show or movie and thought to yourself, what the hell was that about again? Well, then grab some popcorn because we have just the podcast for you. This is Cheap Pop, the place where my friend Matt and I try to take a film, television show, sometimes a video game. We'll see about that last one. Break it down, flip it, and reverse it while giving you our take, our analysis, and any interesting facts or tidbits we learn along the way. Maybe you know them, maybe you don't. We don't really care. We're just here to talk about film and movies. So, today we're going to be talking about Neon Genesis Evangelion episode 21. Matt, how are you doing today?
My hand is cramping from all the note taking. I think I've doubled any amount of notes I've taken on an episode to date. I've spent like 2 hours watching a 30-minute episode of the show. Just pause, play, rewind. Yep. The double audio also happened at the first of this, which drove me insane. I was like, I cannot.
Where someone's talking over, and then you also have background, like someone in the background or
killing
intercom.
Me inside.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that happens where sometimes like I'm trying to take notes and I'm like, it's okay. I don't have to pause it. I can remember like a strong degree of the paraphrasing of what he's saying. And then 5 seconds later, I admit defeat, pause, rewind. All right, play that back again. All right, with subtitles this time. Shit, the subtitles don't match. What did you say again? All right, now I got to make a note of what you said versus what the subtitles say. It gets to be a mess. This is a very backstory dense episode. And I kind of honestly have some mixed feelings about that. While I like everything in the episode, I sort of feel like this is, hey, the finish line's in sight. We need to really just have one episode that just hammers away all this stuff out of nowhere instead of nuggets here and there along the way where we could have, it would have felt more organic. Instead, this is just like, oh, God, give some answers. And it's just like, here's almost an entire episode just like wadded into a ball as I hit the mic and then thrown at the viewer. And you're just like, what am I supposed to do with all of this? It's information overload. We're jumping like timeline here, not timeline as if like multiverse, but like here we are in this year, now this year, now this year, now this year, back to this year, back to present day, now to this year. And you're just like, shit. Okay. Yes. It's just all trying to. Place. Yeah. And it's not even chronological. It's like just by, these two people are having this conversation in this scene. Well, now we're going to go to this year. Oh, now these two people are talking. Well, we're going to go to this year, but this event actually happened before this event. Like, son of a bitch.
Yeah, it's like watching a Quentin Tarantino movie at a certain point. You're like, okay, where are we in the story right now? Because I'm getting lost.
Yep, it's a lot to take in, but we're going to do our best here to go through it. So again, this is episode 21, The Birth of Nerv. The secondary title, because a lot of times you'll see like the second half of an episode have almost its own unique title. This secondary title was, he was aware that he was still a child. I say throw that away because that's really just like the last basically scene. This is basically the birth of Nerv is all you need to know as far as what this episode is, because good God, do you get a pretty strong beat for beat of everything from the second impact to the birth of Nerv. That fills in a lot of gaps, raises some new questions, and makes you think.
Yeah, for having to wait the first 6 or 7 episodes to actually like really get into the show, I'm like, man, you could have easily spanned this over some other period of time, but instead you have forced me to just pay like ultra attention, that's happening, to this episode. I was a little frustrated.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we'll get started out here.
Yeah, I was just going to say, this originally aired February 21st, 1996. I feel like that context is always interesting because just as it relates to like our age and everything, it's just kind of like, so this kind of media was already dropping like when we were there. Like 6-year-old Derek would not have been able to process anything in this.
He would have been trying though.
No, I don't know. The bright lights and robots might have had my attention, but everything else would have given me existential dread and depression at age 6. But
something you can talk to your therapist about later.
Oh God, my therapist would be rich if I watched this at 6. By the way, did you know that these last few episodes from 21 on all have director's cuts?
I did not.
Now here's the good news. It doesn't matter for you, especially watching the Netflix dub, because Netflix did buy the director's dubs, which is why this episode actually does not have the typical immediate intro. If you watched it in Japan, you got that intro like usual. This one, you're seeing the director's cuts now.
Yeah, I actually kept rewinding because I was like, wait, did I miss? Where's my intro? Because this should not be happening. This isn't James Bond.
Yeah, that intro theme is a banger too. I can't ever bring myself to skip it. I'm just like, nope. It's like a minute long. I'm just gonna ride it out. So yeah, it's jarring when this episode starts and you're just like, oh no. But it does come in like 3 minutes into the episode. They finally get to it.
Yeah. So we start off and it's Dr. Katsuragi.
Katsuragi, yep.
Dr. Katsuragi's super solenoid theory. And they're in an underground base. The date's August 15th, 2000. And they're talking about the S2 theory and going back and forth on, is this a theory? Is it proven? Is it a theory? Is it proven? And we do that over and over with this horrible mixed audio track, which just drove me to the brink of insanity. I almost shut off my TV. I was literally in the middle of texting you, like, I don't have patience for this right now. Let's do it another day. But I stuck it through and it became better. So yeah, it's the super solenoid theory is, as you said, the S2 drive. So at this point, again, this is before the second impact. This is all just a theory that he has, and the S2 drive is like the power source of the angels. And so they're trying, and at this point, I'm kind of curious of the full context, because obviously there is something at this facility. So even though they haven't been introduced to angels yet, Adam, the angels come from Adam, but in a way, Adam is not considered an angel, but kind of similar in that respect. So I guess they're talking about like how this thing could still be alive or whatever. And so they're talking about this theory of the S2 drive, and they're just trying to explain it. And it goes against their understanding of what should be humanly, or not humanly, but let's just possible based on like biology, physics, all that. And it's just possible.
Yeah, angelly possible. And it's just breaking their brains. And these other two people like watching back the security footage, because that's what we're seeing here is like security footage. Essentially, they're basically just like kind of just talking about how scientists are almost more, in a way, dogmatic in a sense. Like if something challenges their deeply rooted beliefs, that they're equally immovable to it, because like they can't just take something as is. They have to be able to explain it, I guess.
Yeah. They'll die with the stupidity.
Yeah. And then things start to go bad, very bad, apparently. So we hear in the
surface
audio,
illumination.
Yeah. Stop the surface illumination. It's past the threshold. Apparently, DNA that was inserted into Adam has undergone a physical fusion, essentially. So that's bad. All AT fields collapse. That's really bad, because I think it has been insinuated before that even people have AT fields, just on a much lower level. And so you're like, ooh, that's probably not good. And then the spear, which I'm guessing is another spear of Longinus, we've or I say another
destiny,
the spear of Longinus. That we saw Ray carrying in that one episode. Apparently it was first embedded into Adam's chest, and as they're trying to remove it, it's just sinking in deeper, which apparently makes you wonder, since when you saw him before in present day under Nerv in the central dogma or whatever, he was immobilized, it seemed, by the spear in his chest. But here, when the second impact is about to start, apparently it's like even as they're trying to retrieve it out, the spear is just being pulled in, like it's doing the opposite thing to it. So I don't know. Is that like a threshold thing where it's like, ooh, I was about to say 6 inches, not so bad. Oh, but if you go 8, and then I was like, wait a minute, we're tiptoeing into dangerous territory, walking back.
You know,
it's not the spear. It's not the size of the spear of Longinus. It's what you do with it.
Oh, yeah. When that scene hit and they were talking about it sinking in, I was a little confused, and I kept going back, because I was like, wait, is it sinking in like they're doing something they want to? Because it sounds like it's a bad thing, but from what we can assume is it's a good thing. But I don't know. There's some sort of connection there that I don't think we've got yet, which I hope they'll get into a little bit more. Maybe they will, maybe they won't.
Right.
They talk about, every bit counts. Limit the damage any way you can. And they talk about breaking up the comprising atoms on a quark level. You know about quark levels, right?
Yeah. Another one of those things that I was just like, I'm going to trust Matt to do something on this, or we're just going to gloss over it.
You know what? We're going to gloss over it because I said, nope, I'm not looking up quark level. Quark level is restricted to my wine bottle in the kitchen. I don't give a shit what quark level means. I'm not looking it up. Stop making me Google stuff.
All right.
So
just careful not to stick it in too deep.
I'll try my best, no promises. So we initiate the cooling cycle once the gates of Guff open.
I'm ready.
I don't know if
I'm
you know
ready for
about
this
the gates of Guff, because I also refuse. I will not look up anything else. You give me the info.
Okay. So yeah, we get this brightly illuminated figure, this just gigantic figure rising up, almost like moving like through the ground, essentially like standing up out of the facility. The security footage cuts to black, and we get this top secret disclaimer from the United Nations Supreme Advisory Council.
What level do you have to be at to view it?
5.
That's right.
Level 5 clearance just to view it, and even just mere contact with the document without permission, regardless of whether or not the contents have been examined, will result in life imprisonment, it says.
Yep.
So it's like, ooh, okay. Now, as for the gates of Guff, so this is, you will hear that a time or two in your Ava experience. You were never going to be given a very satisfactory answer. So I had to go to actual research for this here, not just within like the context of Ava, but actual lore and mysticism and everything here. Guff is a Hebrew word meaning body. In Jewish mysticism, the chamber of Guff, or the treasury of Guff, is a treasury of souls. So, for instance, in the Garden of Eden, there was the tree of life, or the tree of souls. When that blossoms, it produces souls, which then fall into the chamber of Guff, or the treasury of souls. There is your context there for Gates of Guff and what that could be illuminating to. Then we get our intro credits.
Well, we forced it to expend energy that interferes with its own anti-AT field, which is the first time I've heard anti-AT field being mentioned. Has this happened previously and I've overlooked it? What is an anti-AT field as opposed to a standard one?
Yeah, I don't know what the explanation would be, but it essentially would just counteract an AT field, like cancel it out essentially as if it were like a frequency. But as far as has it been used, I don't believe it's been used. I know they've talked at times when the Avas have been clashing with angels, trying to offset or cancel out the AT field using their own, because they'll raise their AT field level to whatever, maximum, whatever. So they're trying to do that. As far as an anti-AT field, I don't know. I don't know if it's just that it means it's just canceling it out and it's just a slightly different terminology, or if there's something different about it, unique, that we haven't encountered, but it doesn't come up very often.
Yeah. So we get into the episode, and we are starting off with Kaji calling Masato, and he mentions that he's got one last job to do, and looks at a card for Nerv, saying that the red is reminiscent of blood.
Yep.
Which I looked at his card and I was like, man, there's a lot of 1s and 0s on there. I wonder if that's a binary code thing. And I looked it up and, stopped within 5 minutes because I didn't find anything. So if there's something to that, I'd love to know. There's probably not. It's probably something that was just put there for no reason. Yeah. But I went too deep on it.
Yeah, I didn't think to go that route. That's interesting.
Yeah, I try my best here. So the deputy commander has been abducted. So this was last seen in Ward 8 West, which is inside. And Masato is trying to figure out what's going on and how whoever did this bypassed Section 2, which apparently is pretty hard to bypass.
Yeah, she's immediately like basically being withheld or detained for questioning. And the suits who are coming in are basically like sort of not interrogating her, but they're definitely questioning her because people know about their history, her and Kaji and everything. So it's very clear they think that Kaji is who took the deputy commander. And just the certainty with which they expressed this was kind of like, okay, is this like a guess and they're just making an assumption? Because I would not assume that Kaji's final mission would be to abduct the deputy commander, which then, we'll get into that.
But damn it if the show doesn't want to make you think it is.
Yeah.
So she puts her gun on the table. Chairman Keel is behind this. He's, I guess, the figurehead for this group that's interrogating. Yes. And he said that this was a necessary step. And when, dear Lord, give me his name. I'm going to butcher it if I say it. Futsky, thank you.
Yeah.
He is saying, hey, I kind of expected the council, not Sele, to question me. And they start getting into, we have no intention to create a new god.
Yeah.
So what's your thought at this point?
Well, first of all, I love the fact that Futsky isn't surprised to see them. He's surprised that they're doing all their where it looks like you almost have these giant markers that say Sele 01, and they're not just, it's not that they're addressing him. They're not addressing him as the council. They're addressing him as Sele. And that's the part where he kind of goes okay. So you're dropping sort of the facade of the council thing. You're basically letting the mask slip, doing your actual thing. You bring the background sort of thing forward to the forefront to address me this way. So now I know you're serious about this, whatever this is. As for the no intention to create a new god, hint, hint, they're obviously referencing Ava Unit 1 and the devouring of the S2 drive, which is kind of a little late for that, whether or not it was your intention. You're kind of on that fast track, maybe? I mean, seemingly. So I don't know whether or not something was your intention is almost immaterial at this point, I would say.
Well, when he said that, I'm like, it felt to me like this has been done before, or a conversation that's been had and they've discussed that that's not where they're going with this.
Yeah, I think it's just in line with the scrolls and their discussions of the protocol of what they would do versus wouldn't do, what they would allow, wouldn't allow, and this has deviated from those plans.
Yeah, so we get into some background on Futsky, and there was a bioengineering student at his school, and they said that they were interested in meeting him. We hear Akari, we think Gendo, but no, it's not. It's Yui.
Swerve.
And that definitely, took me for a look. I was like, okay, I was not expecting that. And then I immediately went to, how do they do last names with marriage in Japan?
Still the same way we do.
96% of people the women will take the man's last name, but in that 4%, the men will take the woman's last name, which with his last name makes a lot of sense because it is atrocious.
Rookaboogie. It's fun to say. Yeah. And then there's other motives even in that we'll get into, but yeah, it's Futsky is, as a professor, meeting with this bioengineering student, Yui Akari, and she's very interested in meeting with him in their conversations about what she might do with her research, which apparently has impressed him, even if he doesn't necessarily accept the premise. He's talking about her possible career options and how she could do apply her research in the field. And she points out there is a third option you haven't considered, and that could be the domestic life. Basically, that she would settle down, quote, should she find someone, here's the quote, someone suitable. So, all right, she is Akari, and she's not even dating Gendo at this time. Because initially when I heard it's Yui. Oh, so they're already married? Oh, they're not married. So he does eventually just take her name. Interesting.
I definitely got the feeling that Futsky it's hard to tell with any dubbed content, but there's this really long pause after she says that. And I don't know if that's him thinking that she's coming on to him or him possibly entertaining that. It's very hard to read from
Yeah.
what we get audio wise. But there was something I feel like I was supposed to take from that scene. I'm just not entirely sure what it was.
There's probably layers, probably multiple things. His connection to Yui definitely gives off vibes at some point where there is some measure of love or affection there. Yeah. How much of it? And I don't know the age gap between them, so I can't tell you the ick meter. But yeah, it seems to be. Even though he's much younger here, it's still like, I'm guessing it's probably at least 15 plus years. It's still, I took from that maybe it gave him pause of almost like, wait a minute, am I reading this right? But I also think that he does legitimately think like, oh no, you're a very bright student and your research could have huge implications. I'm here trying, like, I thought the whole point of this meeting almost was that you wanted to talk to me to get direction for your research to advance your career. And now as I'm telling you, you could do this or this, you're like, or I could settle down. Like, why are we having this conversation then? You know what I mean? That's sort of how I took it. But yeah, I could see the other part as well, given how this episode seems to progress.
Yeah, so we get back to the council, and they're talking about Unit 1 attaining absolute existence after assimilating the S2 drive, which I thought was an interesting phrase for that. And then they said that they have no use for a god that has manifested itself.
Yeah. Yep. And then Fuyutsuki's response to that is just that the creation of a god is forbidden. And that's where it's like, I mean, again, how are we gonna, you can't say like, oh, well, it's forbidden. Yeah, but what happened? Are we gonna act like that's not what that thing is potentially now? Like, what was that phrase you used? The one you said was an interesting term that they use, like, has Unit 1 has obtained.
Yeah, obtained absolute existence.
Absolute existence. Yeah. If you're saying something has obtained absolute existence, I would think we're kind of already to that threshold at that point. So,
yeah, I couldn't figure out how they're planning on dialing back, but then they talk about, kind of the secondary concern is, not only are we worried about creating a god, but we're worried about letting that god fall into Gendo's hands, knowing what he'll do with it, which is a legitimate concern.
Yeah. Quote, moreover, we can't allow this god to fall into that man's hands.
Yeah.
I liked the Voldemort thing where it's like a he who cannot be named or shall not be named. Like, everyone in the room knows who they're talking about, but it's, I don't know, something about it just made me kind of smile a little bit.
Yeah, so we get into Tom Riddle's background, and so young Gendo is fun. I like seeing him different. He's still kind of like a harsh, prickly sort of guy, but got into a fist fight. He also mentions when talking to Futsuki that a punch was thrown at him first, and that he's no good at winning affection. He's just used to disdain from other people. So it sounds like he's had a pretty harsh upbringing where he's not really accepted by the people around him. And to no surprise, after we've seen him do the things that he's done, he's definitely more in the interest of what will happen, not who will be hurt in the process. Yeah.
And I thought it was interesting too, because it's a gutsy call. I assume jail works the same way there, where you get like one call. His call is it's not even to Futsuki, but he wants Futsuki to come bail him out essentially, or pick him up from jail. And he's like using this as his introduction. And even Futsuki's kind of like, this is a really way to try and, like, if you've been interested in meeting me ever since Yui told you about me, why is this the way you decided to, like, get my attention? Like, that's a really weird first impression to want to make.
Yeah, it's a strange approach.
Yeah, it's memorable though.
Then we get into talking about the country still had seasons at this time. So we're in another flashback. And that was kind of interesting to me, because I don't think we've really talked about how the Angels have changed things environmentally. I mean, I know we've seen the ice caps being very different than we expected them, or Antarctica being very different. But this is the first time I've heard a mention of, no longer having seasons.
Yeah, it's a climate change thing. The second impact melts the ice cap. So like original Tokyo 1 was flooded. We saw it in the episode Asuka was introduced, episode 8, I want to say, where they're fighting that almost whale-like angel, and they're being dragged by the line, the umbilical cord, basically through the ruins of Tokyo 1. Half the population of the planet died. A lot of that would just be from, whether it was whatever the explosion was or whatever, but you got to think the rest of it would just be like almost drowned, which is pretty horrific. And yeah, the seasons are all gone. It's basically just one endless summer now.
Yeah, so I definitely felt a feeling of jealousy with the Yui Gendo relationship at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if I'm picking up things that are not specifically trying to be laid down, but I'm getting the feeling from the way he's acting. And they talk about believing Gendo sought her out for her talents and because she had an in an organization, which turns out to be Sele, which would make a lot of sense for the things we've seen Gendo do. Is there's always there's a play anywhere he's going.
Yeah, for sure. And do you want to know what that association is?
Sure.
And again, I don't think it's a spoiler thing, because I don't think anything is spelled out any more than this episode. She is the daughter of one of the members of Sele. So that is the N. Yes. So one of those figureheads, I couldn't tell you which one. Not because I'm like hiding spoilers, but I don't know which one. But I take that as one of those marker figureheads, like Sele 01, 02, 03. I don't remember how many there are. There's several. One of those is her father, the person behind that marker, is what I take from that. So that is her in, and that is then going back into the thing we mentioned earlier, could be why it's more advantageous to have that last name rather than Rookie Boogie.
That's good. I definitely didn't pick up on that part. And how did you find that out?
Just in supplemental research. I did more research in the last 2 days getting ready for this episode, us talking about it. I didn't find anything in the episode that said that. I found that looking through additional supporting canon material from the show, like official stuff that it's released, and other media as well. Like they've had Ava Games and stuff like that. That's supplemental, and that seems to be the consistent canon of her origin. Not just that she has an in with Sele, but that she is the daughter of one of the high-ranking Sele officials.
Okay. So the next part here, we get into Futsuki is talking about the last year of the 20th century being when the second impact took place, and that the first year of the 21st century can only be described as hell on Earth, which I imagine that after we talk about all this climate change, that makes a lot of sense. Is that everything was ripped apart, and I'm sure that
economies,
collapse.
Plagues, probably economies collapsing. Like,
thinking of how the people react to something like that.
Oh,
too.
of course.
It's like, the fact that you have any sort of stable economy at this point is amazing, because that's like a zombie apocalypse level shit.
Yep. And then in like 2002, we see in Toyohashi City that Fuyutsuki is basically, again, grumbling about the temperature, 30 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that converts to in Fahrenheit, but he's apparently practicing unofficial medicine, more or less, as a doctor here, which I'm like, oh, that's an interesting trajectory, going from a professor like you were to that. And he even says like that he's basically like a cheap imitation or whatever, but there's a need there, and he's doing his best to kind of offer that. But he's been tracked down by somebody from the, I think from the UN Council, Security Council.
UN Security Council official investigation regarding the incident.
Yes, and they're wanting to bring him in basically. And first, he was hard to find because most of the people are in this almost makeshift city thing, and he's talking about like breathing in the noxic fumes and everything from that, just the pollution. But they want to bring him in to this investigation, and it's interesting to note that the basically person that recommended him, it's left blank on the form. So it's like, oh, you're being recommended for this, but we're not even going to tell you who. And the form wasn't even filled out with like the requesting party or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so you're thinking like, oh, Yui. But
poor Gendo. So, oh gosh, where am I at now? We're talking about
they're on the ship in the Antarctic.
That's my next line here.
What's your next line?
Wife insisted that I give this card to you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're just slightly ahead. So, yeah. So it's that same year. Fusky is sailing on this massive ship through the blood red seas of the Antarctic, which is obviously, as we know, the site of the second impact. And Gendo approaches him, and he's first at surprised just to see that Gendo's alive. It's almost, I picture like the Jim Carrey Grinch, like, you're still living. Like, second impact, half of humanity dies, and you of all people has to be here. And Gendo's like, it's fine. I actually was incredibly lucky. I was on that expedition, but I just happened to leave the day before. Don't think about it. Just a total coincidence that I left the day before. By the way, my wife wanted me to give this card to you. And it's basically, it's more or less like the wedding invitation, essentially, more or less just signifying like, yeah, we got married. Yui and Gendo got married. And Fusky is basically just like, son of a bitch. Not only are you alive, but you and Yui are still together. And now she's like basically chained herself to you, more or less. Just a baffling thing there for him to try and process. But it's a lot to take in, because Gendo then adds to it that Yui's not present on this expedition because she's home with the child. Like, that's a lot to process for Fusky in that case.
Yeah, and we start talking about the Security Council and that twisting their arm doesn't seem to be very prudent. And Gendo makes a comment that no organization that plays by the rules can survive in this age, which seems to make sense, because I would assume you're at a little bit of a level of lawlessness in this society to where you get the job done regardless of what kind of red tape you have to step over to get, that mission accomplished. So he says that he brought him, Futsuki was talking about being brought over because he was not a member of Sele at this time. So more of just like cover, like, oh, this isn't just Sele. There's other people here too. But Futsuki is really like understanding Gendo beyond a level that I think we've seen at this point. Yeah, he's smart. He's not getting played by Gendo. I would say that they're at least on the same level of intelligence. Like, he knows every step that he's taking before it's laid out to him, which I like kind of seeing his character background. So we get back to seeing Misato. She's in a nerve isolation facility. And
same ship and everything, because Futsuki and them are who's witnessing, like looking through the window, basically.
Yeah, and there's some talk about her being the lone survivor of an original expedition. Hasn't spoken in 2 years, because now we're on baby Misato, and she's just stuck in this place, just crying, being sad,
Yeah.
Get over it. Come on, right? Like,
totally traumatized. The Katsuragi expedition, her father was the lead scientist for that. She is Misato Katsuragi. So, everyone dies at the second impact, but her father, his last act is to enclose her in that pod, and she's just found washed adrift in the sea by the time the next help comes. So you almost wonder, like, how long were you just trapped in that confined chamber of a pod? You can't imagine, I guess, the depth of just trauma that would inflict on a person psychologically, let alone a child who already had very conflicting emotions about their father and her relationship to him and everything. And then, I'm not surprised that she went mute for 2 years.
Yeah, but he saved her from that meteor.
Yeah, that meteor, the official story. Yeah, it's definitely interesting seeing where some of these paths crossed early on in this stage, because it's hard to get an exact read on how old Misato is here. You still get the feeling she's very young. And I'm a little confused because I feel like one of our upcoming flashes we see as well a young Risuko, and she strikes me as much older in that scene than Misato, yet they went to college together. So maybe one of them was like doing a master's degree and the other was like a freshman. I don't know. But and that's getting more into the nitty gritty, but seeing Misato at this ship and everything, Fuyutsuki has a tremendous amount of empathy for her, but at the same time, it's kind of just like, yep, tragic. Well, let's just keep going on this tour here and talking about the findings. And I wrote this whole part down here. This is Fuyutsuki giving this voiceover. He's talking about the area of where basically right where the Katsuragi expedition was. He says, a transformed atmosphere perfectly enclosed in a distinct area. The complete eradication of all life forms, including microbes. A vast underground chamber under the epicenter of the explosion, and this giant of light. It seems this incident is full of mysteries. So basically, where they found Adam was already like this almost like terraformed area. And when this explosion and everything goes off, like everything was destroyed. Like not even microbes survive in this, but this underground chamber is really significant because it's like, it wasn't built by man. It was just something that was discovered. And so they started researching in this area, and then they end up triggering that. This artificial surface structure to the chamber is also codenamed White Moon, or as it's shown on other documents, GF-1, which I think is, again, an allusion to the Gates of Guff.
Yeah, I'm curious at this time, Fuyutsuki knows a lot.
Yeah.
Why? Why does he have all this information?
I think on this expedition, I think they're trying to recruit him, honestly. I think they're trying to pique his interest and bring him into the fold. I know Gendo hasn't officially issued that yet, but one, Fuyutsuki is already doing his own digging, and two, I think they're trying to entice him to bring him in on this whole thing. And at this point, he's not for it. He's basically already figured out this is a huge cover up. It's not an extraordinarily large meteor. It's just a blatant cover up. And he's noticed that Sele members are positioning themselves into positions of power. And so he's just determined, like, he's hell bent on bringing them down, on exposing the truth of what actually happened with the second impact, even if it means dragging the name of and implicating Yui Ikari in the process. Because she is a member of Sele. She's not like a figurehead, but she is like a lead scientist for them. Yeah,
he has so much information that, thinking that he's a teacher, how did he get to this level where everything's, clicking? He's obviously been doing some behind the scenes type thing, which is probably where the interest lies from these parties. And to go over a couple of things, so he talks about Gendo knowing that the second impact would happen on that day, that he gathered all of his research together, and then Gendo makes a comment about, I'm surprised you found anything that wasn't incinerated.
Yeah.
And he says, your group, Sele, and the Dead Sea Scrolls lurk in the shadows of the second impact, and talking about that the cavern left behind was by someone that wasn't us.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe 89% was buried, and it was originally a spherical structure.
Yep. Yeah, and I love, too, on the way to that meeting, Fuyutsuki bumps into Yui for the first time in, 5-6 years, something like that, it seems. And he is like, she's like, oh, it's so good to see you. He has no time of day. He's basically just like, you know what? You're part of the problem here. I can't even look at you. He just kind of like, she said something like, oh, it's been a long time. And he's just like, yes, it has. And just keeps walking past her. I was like, oof, that's cold shoulder, man. Like that was harsh. But he confronts Gendo with all of this, and Gendo, other than just the mild surprise of like those documents not being destroyed already, he's just kind of like, well, what are you going to do about it? Kind of like he's unfazed because he knows like at this point, there's not really much you can do. Even if you tried to go public with this stuff, you would just basically be rubbed out anyway. Like no one would, you wouldn't get far essentially. And he mentions that Gendo has just stupid wealth at this point. Like you got to think like through what means he's getting it, whether it's just taxpayer money going into these, whether it was the expedition stuff or through the UN, all that, how they've kind of kept this covert. But Gendo is apparently loaded. They don't tell you to what extent, but they tell you that he's quite wealthy at this point, more than he would need to raise a family of his size for sure.
Yeah, he's definitely making moves for himself along the way.
Yeah.
So there's some mention about, let's see, I believe the mention is of if they're going to repeat this tragedy, talking about the second impact and if there's planning on being a third. And Gendo doesn't tell him no. He says, why don't you join up and then you can figure it out for yourself. It's like, no, I'd rather you just tell me up front. Are you planning on doing this annihilation level event, or are you on the good side?
Yeah, like I need a firm answer before I say anything. This isn't really something I sign on and then like down the road you're like, just kidding. It is the bad one.
Yeah,
like,
it sucks to be you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. They're pouring all these, basically all of mankind's resources going into this new facility, which is another Geofront type thing, an identical match. That should be of note, by the way, to what was found in the Antarctic. So he's basically, I love how after Fuyutsuki confronts him in his office, which, by the way, do you notice Gendo's proclivity for giant office, tiny, almost no furniture?
I thought this was the same office. Was it not?
No, this is at
this is a different office.
This is not in the Geofront. This is just like in some office building or whatever in Tokyo 2, maybe. I don't know. But it's
it looks so similar you wouldn't be able to tell the difference if you saw them side by side. It's just a lot of space, little bit of furniture. And so I love Fuyutsuki is like confronting him with basically like, I'm going to go to the media and expose you for all of this corruption and all these murderous deeds and everything. And Gendo's like, would you like to see the facility? And Fuyutsuki's like, yes, I would. Like, what? Yes, I would not get on like this escalator that goes like however far underground, this long ass escalator, elevator, whatever, to go to this facility. I'd be like, oh, I'm definitely getting murdered down here. There's no chance I'm going to get to the surface. Yeah, especially since I literally just was threatening him 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, but apparently he's not so worried about that. So they get down there and we're introduced to Risuko's mother. I'm not even going to try to say her name because I would botch the hell out of it. So she's just going to be Risuko's mother or Purple Hair. That's going to be my code name. I listed
her as Mom. For the rest of the time forward. Mom.
So yes, he's also, apparently Fuyutsuki also knows her and he's disappointed to see her there. And she's just like, it's the best place to work out these basic theories about fundamental theories regarding biological computers. As we know, she is the architect of the Magi. The 3 Magi computers are all based after her own personality. So this is kind of the origin essentially of that as well. And then we see young Risuko, who looks like she's, 14, 15, 16 maybe. Certainly looks to me comfortably older than Misato did. But again, we know that they met at college, so I'm curious what their actual age difference is, because from a previous episode, I swear to God, it was like one was 29 and one was 30, and yet they look like they're 5-6 years apart. But all the same...
she looks very different in this scene too.
She has
hair.
And it's styled differently too. Yeah. So I mentioned this in a previous episode. It's a subtle thing. It's no spoiler. She was so much like her mother, even in terms of looks, that part of her trying to define herself and break away from that was just, I'm going to change my hairstyle. I'm going to bleach my hair, whatever. It was just trying to somehow differentiate slightly from her mother. But as we know, she ultimately does still get drawn back to the very same facility. In fact, the same title, to do the same exact work that her mother did. So it's like, while you're trying to kind of run away from that image, you do ultimately end up running to it.
Yeah. So they get into this spider-looking monster with human hands. This is Adam again, but this is a different Adam than the Adam we saw at first. And they even mentioned that. They said, this is different. This is not the original. It is born from Adam. This is Ava. And we figure out that this is Ava Unit 0.
The prototype.
So they talk about this being an Adam reconstruction, or if you're reading the subtitles, rebirth project named Project E.
A prototype of a god. And Futsky is so disgusted as he says it. He's like, oh, prototype of a god? Like, how arrogant of you just to try and do this. And again, Gendo, unfazed by Futsky's reactions to things, he's just like, so, do you want to join me in an effort to forge a new history for mankind? Again, I would be so adverse to that. I would just be like, it sounds like whatever you want to do is like very shady, unethical. You're trying to literally like rewrite history in some way. You're trying to go against some sort of natural order here. But I guess as the top of this episode kind of talked about, like scientists will poke and prod at things, insisting on understanding every facet of how it works to such an extent that they kind of like don't stay within their lane, essentially, like the safety and the principle of things. So ultimately it is seemingly Futsky's curiosity that's going to lead him to be more involved.
Yeah, so we get to, this is when the episode 21 title card comes up and it says he is aware that he was still a child.
Yep.
We flash forward to 2015.
Present day.
Is testing the Ava unit. Is it Unit 0 at this point?
Unit 1. She's staring at Unit 1.
Yes, Unit 1. And Ray is going to be the pilot. And then now we're back in 2005 with Masato being younger and meeting Risuko for the first time. And I just wrote, oh, Masato's so cute. Because she is. She's cute. It's cute to see her like different and happy. Like there was
optimistic. There's
the
light and energy.
Like sad.
Yeah.
Not sad all the time, and she plays, but you can tell it's not real. Whereas this time, it feels like very real, like genuine happiness that she has.
Yeah, she's doe-eyed. She's still viewing the world as like it could be a good thing. Like she's clearly through her therapy and everything, like gotten through the trauma of everything. She talks openly about it with Risuko in college. Apparently, Risuko again mentions that a lot of people, because they knew who her mother was, kind of steered clear of her and treated her differently, but not Misato. And Misato never shuts up, as if she's basically making up for the 2 years she spent not talking, which I kind of love that line. I was like, that does seem like something Misato would do. Like one day it's like floodgates. It's like she finally talks again, and then it's like, so what I've been thinking about this whole time is, and just like starts rattling off everything. So yeah.
And there's a mention of her being the only one that treats Risuko normally, which I thought was an interesting line because, you know, she doesn't seem that disconnected from society. Risuko doesn't, but, you know, there's obviously some disconnect there that she's not forming typical bonds with people. She doesn't have a lot of friends, but Masato kind of steps in and treats her like an actual human being. And then we get a mention of the third impact supposed to occur 10 years from now. And I believe the year is still 2005 when that's talked about.
Yep. So this scene here, we have, let's see, did we miss over something?
Did we? I have 4 pages of notes, so.
So Risuko is, you know, writing back and forth with her mother, talking about all this stuff with Misato. And she mentions that Misato vanished from college for a little bit. And when she came back, Risuko basically stayed after her until she admitted that she was just staying at her boyfriend Kaji's house. And then she, basically, it sounds like they were so smitten with each other, they were barely leaving the bedroom or whatever. And as much as Risuko Risuko thinks that he's cute. He's too carefree. She could never tolerate being around someone like that, which is kind of another funny thing too with that, considering that becomes like one of her closer friends, you would assume. Certainly one of the people she's most open and honest with. But her mom's note of the quote is, "It's selfish of me to pretend like I'm a good mother." I thought was an interesting one. It kind of feeds into that because basically she was a single mother and always so consumed in her work that Risuko didn't really know how to adjust super well with others, or especially the topic of boys. And so she thinks that's why that Risuko views Kaji the way she does. Yeah. By the way, on that, you said 2005 for this next scene of the conversation, talking about the third impact being in 10 years. It's 2003. We have a conversation with Futsuki and Yui, and they're at this sort of, I guess it's just like a public park or something. And they're talking about this scenario laid out in Seilei's Hidden Dead Sea Scrolls, the third impact occurring 10 years from now, which should be 2013. So in present day, we've already seen that we've avoided it, at least prolonged it, whatever, for the time being. And Yui responds that organizations like Seilei, which the captions read Garen, which does play in later to what we see in this episode. Dear God, we're still talking about later. That it exists for the sole purpose of preventing that final tragedy. And while Futsuki agrees with Yui, he doesn't agree with Seilei, essentially, in how they're trying to go about things. And he's kind of checking out while she's like kneeling down by Shinji in his stroller. And she's talking about how breaking that seal could mean a cataclysm for the world. And I think that's her that says that. I wrote the quote, and I'm trying to think now, was that?
I think he might have said that.
I think you're right. I think he's who said that.
I don't have who wrote it, but he's definitely checking out side boob at this time.
Oh, yeah. And again,
I think he's like, oh, yeah, milk Shinji.
He's so jealous of that baby.
He's like, come on, just pull one out. Let me see it, you little pervert.
God. Yeah. So, again, he's referencing breaking a seal, which apparently is in line with what Seilei is trying to do in respect to the Dead Sea Scrolls. And so it's like, she says they're trying to prevent a third impact. He thinks the way in which they're trying to do it is by basically walking right up to the precipice of it, like right at the edge of where it's about to happen, and then prevent it somehow at that like last hour. And he's just like, that is so unbelievably reckless. I agree with the mission to prevent it, your vision. I don't agree with what they're doing at all. So he's still kind of like, I'm involved in all of this, but I'm not okay or, condoning any of this. Yeah.
Yeah. So he also mentions that they've kind of been indirectly warning him that if he keeps persisting, they're not going to have any problem snuffing him out, and they're uncomfortable with the amount of info that he has. So he knows he's a target. And at this point, although he definitely felt fearless at the beginning when we started to see him, we can see that that's worn on him over time, and he is less of that fearless guy anymore. He knows that his life can be in danger depending on the steps that he takes from this point forward.
Yeah.
Not that he's scared necessarily, just that he acknowledges that like he doesn't have ultimate control at this point.
Yeah, and Yui says it's kind of the same as kind of true of any of them, but I would say like, well, you being a daughter of a Seilei person means probably not you, but that would be true for most anyone else. He's definitely romantically interested in her in some way, it seems like. And so I don't know what to make of this. She's basically alluding to there's going to be a test that they're doing involving her research, and he basically is like, well, just because anybody is considered expendable to them doesn't mean that that's a reason for you to be their test subject. And Yui just says she'll ride along with the currents. That's why she's with Seilei, but she also says she's doing this for him, referencing Shinji, which I guess is just her belief in what has to be done to ensure his future. And so that's how she's justifying it.
Yeah. So now we're in 2004. We get cute baby Shinji. So this would be a year later at that point. Seems like a lot of growth in a year.
Yeah.
But I guess that does kind of.
It could be more like closer to 2 if you think about it as like the start of one year versus the end of the next, closer to 2 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a lot.
So Fuyutsuki tells Gendo that it's not a daycare center because he's kind of sitting staring at the glass while Yui is about to have this test done. And he initially thinks that Gendo's responsible, but Yui pops in and she says that she wanted Shinji to see that there was a bright future ahead of him.
This won't be scarring at all, I'm sure.
And then we hear mention that those were her last words. It's like, wow, that's kind of rough there.
Yeah. And who's narrating? And who's narrating that mention of it being her last words? Because it's not
Ryusuke's
Fuyutsuki.
mom, I believe, right?
Uh-huh.
And she mentions that is something that she wished for. So now we're getting the feeling that there's some sort of relationship she wished she had with Gendo, would be my assumption at this point. And we see Yui's tombstone, 1977 to 2004. Mm-hmm. And it says there's a comment about Gendo being a changed man after that day, which I don't believe. I think he seems the same.
I do believe it. I do think that the optimism that maybe Fuyutsuki had for him ultimately still going about it, quote unquote, the right way, but just wanting to be the one who did it, like the glory of it. I think he was with that. But Yui, again, for all the talk that he strategically married Yui to get this access, I do think that's true, but I don't question for a moment that Gendo loved Yui and that her death really did impact him. And
I question it now more than ever. I don't know. I'm not getting the feeling
that he loved her.
Like, I get that feeling when he's dealing with Rei in the future, but I'm not getting the feeling from past Gendo that he loves her. And again, that could be voice acting, that could be something else, but they're not playing it up enough to where I'm really buying.
Yeah, you're not getting a lot of scenes with just them directly interacting, for sure. But he disappeared for a week. Even Fuyutsuki is telling him, like, you have so many responsibilities, and I understand you must be heartbroken, but like, you're slacking. Like, you have to be the one to like rule on this stuff or make these decisions, whatever. And Gendo basically says, yeah, I've actually made a plan. I'm proposing a new one today. In fact, I've already submitted it to Chairman Keel. And Fuyutsuki immediately knows right where he's going, and he is pretty much aghast at this. Like, you can't be thinking. Gendo says, I am. The path leads to divinity, something no one has successfully realized. The Human Instrumentality Project. So, this entire thing, Yui's death does change his course of where he's going and how he views all of this. So now
I did get the hint, or I did get the feeling, I guess, let's say, is if we are supposed to be perceiving this love between them, that this plan that he's putting into action, which I am making the assumption has to do with creating this god, in some way will allow him to bring Yui back to life. Maybe that's not his intention, and maybe I'm reading into that too much, but a thought that I had.
It gets explored.
Okay. So we got another time shift.
Yeah, 2008.
We're in 2008. We're with Rasuko. She's writing to her mother about
the Magi being
the basic theories of the Magi. Yep. And Rasuko was informally accepted to Gahern.
Yeah.
Assigned to Project E, and then I feel like I'm glossing over too much, but if I run into
I got it.
Skipping territory, stop me.
Okay.
And then we have Gendo mentioning that he has no regrets about his work when he is together with Rasuko's mom.
Mm-hmm.
She says something along the lines of, you can't let go of Yui. They share a
even so, I don't care.
Kiss of sorts.
Yeah, she plants one on him, and it's not clear if he's like into it.
I'd say hers is passionate. His is Gendo.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
But Rasuko is watching at this point, and to my future theories, something is going on with her and Gendo, but I do not know what it is. I don't know if it's a love. I don't know if it's like a fatherly type admiration. But her seeing this happen with her mother triggers something, and I don't know what it's triggering. And we'll get to that a little bit later when we see some outlines being drawn.
Yeah, we gotta get into some, probably the darkest part of this episode, the thing that most sticks out. So we get the scene of, well, first Gendo showing off Ray. So I'm just a smidgen ahead, I guess, on the darkness I was talking about.
You're right on where we are, though. Gendo showing off Ray to Gahern, is that?
Garen, I think is how it's said. Yeah, Garen.
Garen HQ, and says that this is an acquaintance that had asked him to look after this child, and immediately Rasuko's mom says that she reminds her of Yui. Masato is working for Gahern.
Yeah, at the second branch, which disappears later.
In third branch, Germany.
Yeah, Germany, that's what I meant. Yeah.
And at this point, I believe Masato
her and Kaji have broken up.
Kaji have just broken up.
Yes.
So we get into...
I like the line, too, with Risuko and her mother. Her mother says, "A cold analyst like you risks losing out on happiness." And Risuko responds that the definition of happiness is even more nebulous. Just kind of their own worldviews and philosophy.
Such a scientist thing to say. So
now we're into the darkness.
Ray is talking to Risuko's mom, and she is trying to be helpful. And she's like, "Oh, you're lost? How can I help you?" And she said, "It's none of your business, you old hag." Or, "None of your business, old hag."
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, dear Lord. And she just keeps reaming her over and over. It's like, old hag, old hag, old hag. And
that old hag is such an incessant bother. That old hag is no longer useful. And she's saying, like, I'll have to tell Commander Akari or Director Akari to scold you. And she's like, why? That's how he talks about you. And yeah, then she starts just looping on that. And then it gets disturbing.
Yeah, so Rasuko's mom is now choking Ray to death and says something along the lines of,
I got the quote.
Plenty of replacements for you.
You're nothing. There are plenty of replacements for you, Ray. You're just like me.
Yes. So we know that the Magi are in some way responsible for Ray. We do not know Rasuko's mom's involvement at this point. But what did you take from that quote? Is that there is another version of Rasuko? Oh, well, I guess the Magi would be another version.
The Magi is effectively, the research is done, it's being built. And now I think with her daughter coming in, it's another brilliant mind that could continue in that line. And so it's like between the computer now existing, which is literally just her, but three parts of her that can be more rational to an extent because they don't have the emotional conflict within them. And now her daughter being there, I think there are multiple avenues for which she is disposable. And I think she has her own feelings of insecurity because I think she threw herself at Gendo because she loved him. And I don't think he necessarily reciprocated.
Oh, she threw herself at him?
Yeah, saying he can't let go of Yui, but I don't care. And then like planting a passionate kiss on him. And he's just kind of like, he's not pulling away, but he's also not like into it. Like you said, he's Gendo. So I think at that point, I think the way that scene probably finished out was him ultimately either rejecting her or just pulling back enough that she knows she can't have that. And so I think that's why what Ray said broke her, because it was rejection and then it was ultimate salt in the wound, spit in your face, basically. And now she knows she's disposable. And then, oh, shit. And I killed Ray, a freaking 5-year-old child. Like, yep, we're done here. What's that? The ledge? Bye. Like, this is it. Yeah. An incredibly dark moment in this episode where I was just like, oh, right. I'm watching Evangelion. Whew. Like, it was almost too, like, not gloomy and depressing for a moment. We have to have murdering a child in here.
Yeah, I like it, though.
It definitely added to the memorable moment. Like I said, it's something that, like, when I think of this episode, there's like 3 beats I think of, and that is absolutely the first one that comes to mind. So she throws herself over the ledge to her death at the command center, crashing right at the entry port to the Magi system, which was oh so appropriate.
Well, this was the day that she kills Ray is
Yep.
the day that the Human Instrumentality Project dissolved Gehern. I can't pronounce it. Say it again.
The Human Instrumentality Council dissolved Gehern, and everyone transferred to the new organization called Nerv, kept their same titles, obviously, except obviously Dr. Akagi.
Yeah, which is bullshit. Like, she's valuable.
Yeah,
I don't know why they wouldn't bring her in. You know, it's not like she's done anything weird.
She's on the up and up. She's available, right?
Yeah, she's doing all right. Hey, she kills kids now. Like, that's a valuable thing to have.
Yeah.
So there's blood everywhere. There's a chalk outline, but I don't immediately think, oh, she killed herself. That's an option. I think maybe Gendo killed her. I think maybe Rasuko killed her, which, if you want to talk about dark, that would be pretty dark, but I would love it.
Yeah. I don't know what their official story was. I think they do say that she killed herself, and it's never... Internally, you don't see people really questioning it. It's kind of like a taboo thing, I guess.
Yeah, and there was, the meteor was the second impact, so we believe everything that, they're telling us at this point.
Sure.
So we're back in 2015.
15, present day. And we're going into the home stretch.
Freeing Futsuki. He pretty much warns him at this point. He's like, hey, Kaji, you're putting your life in some serious danger by doing this.
Yep.
And Kaji tells him that he's doing this to get closer to the truth inside himself.
That was like the most melodramatic addition. It's like, I'm just doing it to get closer to the truth inside of me. I was just like, all right, calm down, sir. Calm down. That's something that if someone said that to me, like in real life, I'd be like, all right, you do that. Weird person. I'm just going to go stand over here away from you as you figure out the truth inside you.
And we get this comment that Kaji had provided Commander Akari with a sample of Adam.
Episode 8, you saw it.
Sample?
Yeah. He gave...
Sample. Oh, yes. Sorry.
Yeah,
I was thinking of Big Boy Adam, not Little Adam. You're right.
No, it was the embryonic whatever of Adam, which I never understood how Adam reduced from that glowing giant back down into that. But that's what Kaji delivered in his introductory episode.
I totally forgot because that's been so long ago in my head with all of these notes. But yeah, and that also makes me question, like, seeing where Kaji is now versus that act is like, why did you help him? Because I definitely don't feel like you're on his team, but that seems like a very like teammate move to do.
He's trying to constantly leverage all 3 sides against each other. So there's times where he has to help one side and giving information or giving resources, and then that gives him access to get further into that. So him doing that for Gendo allowed him to get the access inside of it to learn more about what actually happened. And he ultimately finds out about Adam being down in the basement, essentially, because of that access. He didn't get that access with Nerv until he delivered that.
Yeah.
So it's just trying to leverage things to ultimately find out.
So we get to this scene where Kaji is standing in front of, I believe, like a air conditioning unit type thing.
Looks like where he meets up with his source, the cat lady. But it doesn't tell us, but that's what it reminded me of. I don't know if that's where he is.
Yeah, so he said, what took you so long? Definitely a sense of familiarity with whoever is there, and then gunshot, which literally happens right after the scene where Masato gets her gun and badge back.
Yep.
And at this point, I believe that the show is leading me to believe that Masato may be responsible for Kaji's death. something that she is doing to get further. Kind of like we're going to go back to Harry Potter here.
Sure.
How certain people are killed off in order to progress the lie that they're a part of something.
Yeah. A lot of fans had that theory, and it's one of the very few things that Hideki Anno has come out and addressed. He says that is not what he was trying to imply, that Misato was not who shot Kaji. You're never told. And I hate that. That's one of those things I mentioned before as a loose thread that I just don't think it ever got wrapped up for whatever reason. But one of his sources, one of his informants does shoot him, and Hideki Anno he even acknowledged, like, I see why people thought that, but that is not what happened. He almost seems protective of Misato's character to an extent, where he's like wanted to clarify that would not be something Misato would have done. But it does definitely look like that, because I had the same thought as you. In fact, the first 2 full times I watched the series, I was of the belief that's what happened.
Well, and when she gets home and she listens to the answering machine, I think she's already had.
I think she just knows. Yeah.
She knew that he was thinking that his end was near.
And just him being released after supposedly abducting the director, she knows, like, oh, if they let me go and they said, yep, the matter's resolved, that's pretty much saying, because she says, like, oh, did he? And the guy cuts her off and is like, I can't say, ma'am, or I can't answer that. So she's kind of knowing, like, there's only one way this kind of thing could have gone. And so it must have happened that way. And then, the answering machine. Yeah.
So she's home. She's sad. She immediately starts drinking, listening to the messages, but she looks at the answering machine with like such a fear,
apprehension. Yeah.
Like she knows what she's about to get.
I have the full message if you want it.
Yeah. Go for it.
Katsuragi, it's me. By the time you get this message, I've probably made life a lot harder for you. For that, I'm sorry. Give my apologies to Risuko as well. I know I don't have the right to ask for favors, but there are some flowers I'd like you to look after. If you could water them for me, I'd appreciate it. Shinji knows where they're at. Katsuragi, the truth is with you. Keep going and don't look back. If I can see you again, I'll say the words I meant to say 8 years ago. Goodbye.
So, also, weird subtitle thing here. Did you catch it?
Whoa, which one exactly?
Risuko is subtitled as Kichan. Kitchan. And I went back 3 times.
Chan is like a sign of respect that gets put on names. So, like, for instance, to go with a very tonally different show, Shin-chan, the last name is not Chan. It's Shin Godzilla. Like, Shin and Chan are both used as like respectful terms that you like append onto someone's name. So I think it's that, and I think the English dub would have just been like, no, we don't use Chan or whatever in this case. So we're just going to say Risuko.
Yeah.
But I think it's still referring to the same person.
Yeah. So at this point, Misato's sad. Obviously. So.
Inconsolable.
She's thinking that he's dead, which his message does leave, something to be said. Maybe he's still alive. If I see you again, I'll say the words I meant to say 8 years ago. But the belief from me is that he left that not knowing 100% if he'd be able to get out of his situation.
It's the call at the very start of the episode. The very start of the episode when he calls her, so it's well before he meets with the informant.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, he's dead.
Long time ago.
He did.
Man, just let me have a slice.
I didn't want Kaji to die either. By the time it happened, he was one of my favorite characters.
It just brings me back to like, what is the pill now? What is the pill?
Yeah, and where was he putting it?
So she calls him an idiot, or she's talking about herself for believing that things might go differently.
Yeah.
And then Shinji makes a mention of nothing I could do, nothing I could say. I was just a child, which is the first line we've heard from Shinji.
Yeah, it's his only line in the episode.
And I feel at this time that Shinji's different. And I can't tell you why. He's in his room, he's listening to his thing. But I feel that there is something different about him that I can't put my finger on at this point. And his line, acknowledging that he is just a child, seems like a very interesting thing for him to say, which I think is some sort of blend between him and, the Ava after he's been released, that this is not necessarily, it's partially his thought, but it's also looking at it from the view of someone else making a commentary. Oh, he was just a child. I was just a child. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think mentally and emotionally, he's definitely in a rough spot after everything that happened the episode before. I don't think he's had time to recover or anything. And I just don't think he knows how to handle the situation. He's just like, I can't even begin. I think he can understand from the context clues what that something terrible must have happened. And he's just like, I can't, what am I supposed to do about this? What can I say to do something about this? And so he just kind of like, that's a consistent thing with him, is just sort of like shutting down, essentially. Like, I can't handle this. I can't deal with this. And so he runs away. He goes to his room and he buries his head under the pillow and he just kind of bemoans his inability to do anything about it. So I do think in some way he's not the same as he was before he vanished into the LCL within Ava 1, but it's not clear yet what that might entail.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and that's how we wrap the episode. It's incredibly...
Or so you think.
What was more is there?
The rest of the episode, which wasn't real, it's because that stupid no intro thing. So I'm still taking notes, and I realized that Netflix has switched on me without my permission and has gone directly into 22. And I'm just like, wow, this feels even longer right now. And not until I checked like 5 or 6 minutes later did I realize I'm already into the next episode. And
nice.
I had a joke planned out that I was so excited to say this episode, and I can't because it has nothing to do with what's happening.
Yeah, you're gonna have to wait. 22. What even is 22? I want to look at the title. I have it written down somewhere. Episode 22 is Staying Human.
Starts off with Kaji and Asuka in Germany.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, that'll be a good one. But this was a very dense backstory loaded episode. Like I said, I wish in hindsight they would have broken this up in pieces. You could have still had the big episode of the Birth of Nerv. I just think that this was way too loaded for one episode. This should have been, there are parts that should have been dropped in around the other episode somewhere, even if you had someone like, for instance, Risuko's mother. Maybe you don't see that incident in the past episodes, but you have someone alluding to that grisly end or that the controversial thing of her figure. You know what I mean? Something like that. Like, oh yeah, the Magi is based around her, but it's kind of hard to say if that's a good thing or not, considering what some people say she did. Something like that would have been like a way to build intrigue so that you would have a payoff here. Instead, this is just like, whoa, that's out of nowhere. Holy crap, that's dark. So yeah, very interesting. I have theories. We will revisit this episode to an extent. I have multiple theories that I want to discuss from this, but I cannot discuss yet. Kind of like you talked about, we have to get at least through 25, 26 before I can circle back to these. Maybe even end of Evangelion. But there is a theory I want to talk about pertaining to two characters that have a lot to do in this episode for sure.
I strangle a clone.
I could even branch it off and say 3 characters to an extent. But yeah, that's what we got coming down the road. This will be good. We got the good stuff all rolling out here. Apparently director cuts, that I was delighted to know that. I was like, director cuts? No. Oh, good. It's what we have. All right. That's fine. Even my Blu-ray copies, it's the Netflix dub. So I got it. I got the same stuff. So that would be awkward if we were both doing the review and one of us was watching the director edition and the other not.
What are you talking about?
Yeah. Like, where the fuck did you get that?
Yeah. A purple dog?
Oh man. So yeah, we're going to see what happens now. Now we'll actually get the further continuation of learning about present day, what's going to happen with Shinji and everything after He disappeared into the LCL. We're gonna, as you said, we're gonna delve more into what's going on with Asuka because shit's gonna hit the fan. 25-26 is paired together. It's effectively a 2-parter more or less. So if we're on 22, that means in a way we're almost like this is like the final sprint here. So shit's gonna really pick up. But that'll be next time. I don't have my exact script in front of me, so I'm just gonna whiff it here. Whiff it, riff it. Probably gonna whiff.
Whiff it real good.
Whiff it real good. Hashtag whiff it real good. Yeah, those are our takes. You may think them cheap, but screw you, they're ours. Screw you, Gendo Akari, they're ours. Call back to the Magi first episode of that. But that's all for our time. Thank you so much for watching, listening, whatever. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube, Cheap Pop, or follow the podcast here. You'll get episodes a week or two in advance here this way. We will be watching End of Evangelion September 23rd and recording that night. I'm guessing it'll be the following week that I finish editing it because God knows how long that episode is going to be. But that's my time. That's Matt's time. Till next time, guys. Thanks for watching.